Pause. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Rachel Vingsness, the Director of Career Development of the BRAC Career Center at Natick Service Council. I am really excited to have you all join us for this class on Advanced Excel. Our instructor today is Sarah Calcutt, and I will hand it over to her for her sage advice and expertise on the topic.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for being here, taking this time with me to learn a little bit more about Excel. I'm just here to make some things a little bit less intimidating. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics today, but really these are about going the next step with different spreadsheets. So often I'm going to be working with existing spreadsheets like what you're seeing right now, because I find that often these sorts of topics that we're talking about, you're working off of a spreadsheet that either someone else made or you gradually put together and then realized I have all this data and I need to do some cool stuff with it. So we're going to work on all of that together here today. One of the first things I want to talk about with all of you is formulas. Formulas are something you can use in Excel to calculate different stuff, but it's also just a way to tell Excel to do something. Excel is, at a very kind of low sense, a computer. And so you have to tell it in very specific language what you want it to do, and it will do exactly what you tell it to do. Because of that, it's very precise. But there's some really quick things that I find that people can use right away. So I'm using a sample spreadsheet here. This is a spreadsheet that you can get from the Natick Service Council. If you get in touch with them, they'll be able to send you a copy to practice with if you'd like to practice right along with me. I highly encourage you to practice these things. So feel free to pause the video at any point, try things out, and then come back once you've actually tried it out. All right. So I am working with a sample spreadsheet here, but for now, I'm going to start with a completely blank spreadsheet so that we can show you some basic formulas so that you can get a feel for how they all work. They all kind of work the same way. Because we need something to work with, I'm going to put in a couple of random numbers. So you'll notice I'm just, whoops, I actually put a letter in there. But I'm just putting in some numbers and they're all over the map. But I'm just putting in a couple random numbers here, and you can put in whatever numbers you feel like if you want to try this out. So I have a couple numbers here, and maybe I want to add all these numbers up. You can tell Excel to do that. And so the cool thing about this, I can, I'm just going to a random cell here, which is A12. And the way that you tell Excel to do something is you use equals. I used to have a computer teacher that told me that equals is how you tell Excel, I want you to calculate. So right now I have equals. If I start to type, you'll notice that it's going to give me some options. So I'm going to start to type in sum because I want to add all these things up. So you'll notice as I start to type, I get all these options down here to choose from. But because we know exactly what this is going to be, it's going to be sum. I can just keep writing. So sum, just like this. And at this point, I could add a parenthesis and start to put in my numbers, or I can have a tab. I just hit the tab button and you'll notice it just capitalized everything and it's looking for some numbers. Now, I can click on individual numbers. So maybe I just want to do the first number, which is A1. And then maybe I want to add and then I'd add a comma for the next number. You'll notice that right here, it kind of tells you what to do. There's always that kind of coaching, trying to get you to put in the right thing here. So it's saying number 1, comma, number 2, comma. So that's one option for how you can do this. You can say, I want A1 and A2 and A3, etc. And at any point, I could hit enter and it will start to calculate that. And if I click on the cell, it says 26 here, right here. But if I look up at the top, it's going to say sum of A1, A2, and A3. So if you're ever not sure where a number is coming from, it'll tell you right up at the top. Now, that's one way to do the sum, but I could also do equals sum And again, I'm using that tab, and I can click and drag to get all of these numbers. And you'll notice I did A1 through A10. And when I hit enter now, it's going to give me that sum of all of those numbers. Now, one of the things you can do because you're using that formula is because I've done the sum of A1 through A10, but I don't have anything in A9 or A10 yet, I could put a number in here like 40. And you'll notice when I hit enter, it's going to change our values down here. That's why it's so much better than necessarily just adding up all the individual numbers. You can, if you want to, use that same formula to say, like you can use it like a calculator, equals the sum of 40 and 50 and 20 and 2. I could use it to do the exact same thing, but often you want to work with the numbers that you have, and that way if you change them, it will automatically update. So it's kind of a powerful calculator. Now, another cool way to do this, if you just need a quick sum and you don't need a running total like we have here, you can highlight all of these numbers, and you'll actually see at the bottom of the sheet, it'll tell you the sum right here of all the numbers that you highlighted. It also gives you the count and the average right below it. So you've got all of those options just as a quick option right there. So if you ever need to add something up real quick and look impressive, you can just highlight and there it is. So you can pull that right in. So feel free to try that out for yourself. Try the sum formula. There are other formulas like it. So for instance, I talked about average as being one of them. If I do equals average, and you'll notice average is one down from there. So I can actually hit that and hit tab, average, and I can do the same thing. I can pull in all the numbers, or I can click individual numbers and use the comma. And there it is. So you can use the average the same way and count the same way. But this is a good way if you want to have a running count or a running average as we go. So for instance, if I make this 3 a 33, that's going to change my average a little bit, and it changes my sum. These are smart cells, so to speak. All right. Maybe we have more numbers. So for instance, maybe I have, a couple numbers over here. And I'm just putting some random numbers in so that I can show you this. But maybe I want to see the difference between these numbers. And actually to do this, rather than using random numbers, although you can use whatever numbers you want, if you're using the sample sheet, you can go to the temp chart sheet. You'll notice we've got a high temperature and a low temperature. And maybe I want to see the difference between those two. What I can do is say equals this minus this. And when I hit enter, it just does it. I could do the same thing if I wanted to add them together or multiply them. Multiply, by the way, you don't use an X, you use an asterisk. That's multiply, and divide is a slash. But anyway, I've done this for one of them. I could go in and do the same thing for each one, but if I wanted to speed things up, I could come here and hover over that bottom right corner. So right here, you see that bottom right corner that's got a box? If I hover over it until I get that black cross, I can click and drag, and it's going to do it all for me. So now you can see it just did all of that math with us just clicking and dragging. So something else about formulas, these are a couple basic ones. I'll talk about some of the more complicated ones as we go through today's session, but you should know that formulas are one of those things that you can Google. A lot of people want to know, what does this formula do? Or how does this formula work? And so if you were to Google a specific formula, for instance, maybe you wanted to use that, sum formula or the average formula, and you don't remember from this video, you could easily Google it. And there are plenty of tutorials that go through this exact same step. So you can try this out for yourself. Especially with formulas you don't use frequently. There's a whole ton of formulas out there that you can use. And so you're not restricted to the ones that we're talking about here. This is just to kind of get you started. So if you haven't tried this already, to extend some formulas so that you don't have to type it out individually for each cell, go ahead and try it out. Feel free to pause the video now, and you can come back as soon as you're done with that, and we'll talk about our next topic. All right. Hopefully you've tried out all the stuff that we've talked about so far, but right now we're going to move into a slightly different topic. I'm going to go over to the fundraiser RSVPs tab, which is this one right here. And I'm going to draw your attention to column K. Column K has first names and last names, and these are all fake people, just so you know. This is a random data generator that I've used to create all of this information. And I've got tons of information in this spreadsheet, but I'm going to focus on this particular column here because we've got information in here. We have first names and last names, but they're all squished together. So if I wanted to arrange this entire spreadsheet in alphabetical order by last name, I wouldn't be able to do it using this particular column. Just a note, I do actually have them split by first name and last name at the front here, but this is for a case where I might not have them split. So if I've got their full name here and I want to split them into first and last, what I can do is I can use an option called text to columns. This allows you to take text and split it up into columns based on different criteria. Maybe there are semicolons in there. Maybe there's a space. In this case, it's first name, space, last name. So I can use that same option to, separate them by that space. So to do this, the way that I do this is I can highlight all of these. I'm going to highlight the whole list, which is about 200 names here. And I don't have to scroll up. I'm going to just scroll up so you can see it all. So we have that full list here. I'm going to go to the data tab. So that's right here, the data tab. And go to text to columns. Okay. When I do text to columns, it's going to ask you a few things. One thing is, how is it going to split this up? I use delimited because I like to point out a specific piece that's keeping things moving forward. In this case, because it's spaces that are splitting them, you could actually use either of them. Fixed width is a case where all of your data is in one cell, but it's all split up by spaces. So maybe I had first name, last name, email address, a whole bunch of things, and they're all split by spaces. I could use those spaces to split it up. In this case, it really doesn't matter which one you pick. I tend to use delimited because you can use it for other things too. You can choose anything you want. So like if they all had a period in between them, like first name, period, last name, you could use that period to split them up. So if I click delimited here, you'll notice space is an option. I can check off space and it'll actually show you a preview of what happens. Now we have two columns, first name and last name here. And then you can just skip straight to finish. There is another third step where it just says, hey, is this definitely going to be just a general one? Is this text? Is this a number? Basically making sure that every format is okay. But in this case, it's just text. So I can click finish. Now, you've noticed we've got most of our data looks great. We do have one outlier here, which is Dee Dee. Dee Dee is probably Dee Dee with a space. And so it took those spaces and said, oh, I see a space here, so I'm going to split this one. And I see a space here, so I'm going to split here. So there are cases where you may have to go back in and actually alter them. So it's always a good idea to check your work when you're done. It turned out that there were only a few cases like McFall here. That's probably all one word. So we can go ahead and change that. But that's something you'll need to worry about. These are real people. Well, they're not real in this case, but when you're dealing with people, there are always exceptions with names. So it's a good idea to check your data after you've done it to make sure that there's no mess ups. Like in this case, it's Dee Dee. So we can pull that in, and I'm just going to move this over to that column. So that's how you do a text to columns split. And so I highly recommend you take some time to practice that. I'm going to do a Control Z to undo everything I've done so that this goes back to one column, because I actually already did it over here. But go ahead and try that out. And then once you're ready, you can come back to our video here, and we'll go into our next topic. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about that you might want to do is going to focus on this donation column here where we have the donations, and you'll notice that they're all different colors. This is coming from something called conditional formatting, and this can be used for a number of different things. It's really good for identifying anomalies. So you might want to show a cell in red if it's over a certain amount or under a certain amount or has something in it that's not so good. You can use it for something that would be odd in the data. You can also use it to color code by ranges. So that's actually how this is set up. I have it set up so that donations in a lower range are going to be green, donations in a middle range are going to be yellow, and donations in a higher range are red. It was just a completely random option that I chose. But maybe I could look at this yes or no column, and I might choose that I want all the yeses in green and all the no's in red. I could choose to put that in here using conditional formatting. So a couple other ways that you might use this. You also might use it in a case where you're tracking expenses or something like that. You might want to flag anything over a certain amount or something in the negative. Maybe you want to talk about withdrawals versus deposits. You can do all that kind of stuff in here as well using that same kind of color scheme. And the cool part is this will work in both tools, by the way. I know I've been working in Excel. I will say that all the things that we're talking about are also things that you can do in Google Sheets. They work pretty similarly, which is why I haven't been using both of them. You can always use Excel here to practice, but feel free to try it in Google Sheets. I will point out that if you're in Google Sheets and you're having trouble finding something, you can use the help to search the menus. So if you're looking for that text to columns option, you can start to type in text to and try to find columns that way. So you'll notice then I have split text to columns. So there are all those same options that we're doing in here. It's just that they look a little bit different in here, but really it works very much the same way. All right. So let's try out some conditional formatting. I'm going to use that example that I was talking about where we're going to use yes and no, just to give you a very simple option, but I'll show you some other options that you have based on this. So right now we've got our yeses and nos, and we want to use conditional formatting. So I'm going to go back to our home tabs. That's this tab right up here. That's going to give us our options for conditional formatting. And I'm going to highlight this whole column. So I can use the conditional formatting here. Right here, you can click on it. And you'll notice that you have a ton of options, and you can choose to create something however you want it to be. I like to use the highlight cells, which is how I got the different colors. That's going to color the different cells. And in this case, since it's text, I can do equal to or text that contains. Equal to works just fine though. But if I want to say that everything that's no, I want it to be red. And you'll notice that there's an option here, light red fill with dark red text, but I could also do custom format of whatever I wanted it to be. But I'm going to use that light red fill with dark red text because I feel like it's very appropriate for no. And you'll notice you can even see it happening on here. It's just there already. Super easy. And then you can do the same thing with your yeses. So if I hover, again, the whole thing, conditional formatting, and then I can highlight the cell equal to, and I decide I want to do yes. And I don't want light red fill because that's going to be the same. So I'll do green. And then if we scroll up, you'll see that we've got kind of Christmas colors going on here. But this allows us to kind of easily see whether someone's yes or no. And if someone changes their mind, so like if I were to go to this no and make it a yes, it's going to turn the cell green automatically when I hit enter. And you'll notice if I have a maybe in here, so maybe I have a maybe, it takes out the formatting because we don't have an option for maybe. So in this case, you can even see it's white, so there's clearly something wrong here. All right. So that's one way to use conditional formatting. You can also, I want to show you what the conditional formatting looks like here for our different rules. So if I were to use that conditional formatting and highlight the rules, the way that I'm doing this is by doing greater than and less than. So you'll notice that if I'm doing greater than a certain amount, and you can pull in those particular formats. So you can do the same sort of range. And so you might want to do between, and yeah, that's what I did for this one. So it was between this, and it would be the whatever the fill would be. You can do the same thing in Google Sheets just to show you where it is. Let me pull it up for you. You can do that same formatting. It's in a slightly different place if I remember correctly, but if I wanted to do that same yes, no, or other version here, I could highlight everything. And I believe it's under format here, format, conditional formatting. And again, it will work the same way where you can kind of fool around with it right here. So I can say I'm formatting cells, but I want it to be between a certain amount, and it will tell you exactly what it is. Now, the cool thing about Google Sheets is you can actually see my rules that are applied to a specific cell right over here on the side when you click on it. So you can have, it's telling you anything greater than 500 is red, anything greater than 100 is yellow, anything less than 100 is green. So that's how I set this up, but you can see all of that in Google Sheets. It's not as obvious in Excel that you have all those there. Another way that you can use them, and for this, I'll move into my temp chart. So if you go back to the temp chart option, right here down at the bottom, we're going to go to that tab, is you can use, and I'm going to get rid of our differences because we don't really need them here, but I can use a conditional formatting to give me an idea of the highs and lows here. So if I do conditional formatting and I do a color scale, this will show me the hottest and coldest temperatures. So in this case, it's getting slowly colder. So it's a perfect gradient. But if I were to pull in a random number, so like if I were to put like a 26 up here or 25, you'll notice that that one gets red because it's a lot lower than the other numbers. So it will automatically format accordingly. And then you'll notice, hey, we had one really cold day. I probably wouldn't use green to red here, but you can use any option you want. And in fact, you can even, mess around with them and make your own. So that's conditional formatting. I'm going to give you some time now. I encourage you to pause the video if you haven't already and practice this skill. It's something that I think comes with time, definitely something to practice. People can get very excited about conditional formatting. I recommend using it sparingly because if you have a whole ton of color all over your spreadsheet, it's really easy for your eyes to glaze over and have no color. So what I recommend people do is really use it sparingly. So I might decide that I really want it for donations because that's important, but I might decide that, you know what, yeses and nos are really not a big deal for us. We know when people are here. So I might just decide to format that all back to our normal setup. So I could choose to clear that rule. So I'm going to clear the rules from selected cells here. And that just gets rid of the rules and now it's all back to normal. All right, so take some time to practice that and then come back when you're ready and we're going to do some more fun stuff in Excel. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a VLOOKUP. So with a VLOOKUP, that's another formula that you can use. A VLOOKUP allows you to compare information from multiple spreadsheets. So in this fake case that I have here, where I have all this fake data, we've got all these people and we have their email addresses and we have all this information about them. But we also have, if you go to your emails tab, which is the last one in the spreadsheet, We have their job title and their company, which again, this is all fake. But we have those same people with their job title and their email. So what you're going to want to do here is maybe I want to pull in all the information about their RSVPs, or maybe I want their favorite color, whatever it might be that's in this spreadsheet, I want it in the other spreadsheet for whatever reason. This can happen a lot. Sometimes you need to pull in specific information, or you have a specific list of people that you need to pull from, and that list is a subset of all the people here. So like maybe you have a list of 20 people and you want to find their stuff without having to search for each one. This is a good way to do that, is by using the VLOOKUP. So you're going to want to start on the spreadsheet where you want the information to go. So in this case, I have this little spreadsheet here and I have all the information about their job titles, and I want to put their attendance record on here, or whatever their attendant or their RSVP information right here. So I'm going to make a little column header. I'm all ready to go. But before I get started, one of the things that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make sure that the field that the two spreadsheets have in common, in this case, it's email address. Email address is a great option because there can't be duplicates. There can be multiple people. I have a sister-in-law with my exact name. We are both Sarah Calcutt. It's confusing at family get-togethers. But we have our email addresses here, and email addresses are unique. We do not have the same email address. So you could still identify who is who based on that. So it's always a good idea to use something that is as unique as possible. Another really common one for people to use here is ID numbers. Often companies and different organizations will have ID numbers, and you can use that as that unique identifier. But you have your email or your username or whatever it might be, make sure that that is in the very first column of both spreadsheets. So in this case, if I scroll over, right now it's in column C. So I'm going to want to get rid of these two columns or move them around so that this is going to be the very first column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually highlight these two. I'm going to do Control X to get rid of them and Control V over here in L to move them over. And then I'm just going to delete these columns so that email is in A. The other thing I'll want to do before I get started is in both cases, I'll want to do my filter option and sort A to Z by that email. In both cases, sort A to Z. This just helps Excel do a better job. Because of the way Excel is, and it's very systematic and it will look through everything very methodically, it's a good idea to organize the data the same way. And what I find is the best is if whatever is the same between the two spreadsheets in the first column in alphabetical order. All right, so we've got that all set up, and now we are ready to actually pull in some information. So in the first cell here, we're going to do this all for the first cell, and then we're just going to extend it down the exact same way that we just did it. So I'm going to do equals and start to type in VLOOKUP. That's what this is called. So VLOOKUP here, and I can start to hit tab. And you'll notice again, it's got that kind of coaching here. The reason why we're going to go over this is because these things that it's telling you to look for don't always make sense. They're not, they're kind of jargony. So I'm going to explain what each of them mean. So the first one is the lookup value. So the lookup value is going to be in column A. So what I recommend people do is I'm looking at column A. This is what I want to use in my existing spreadsheet. This is what I want. And then I'm going to put a comma because that's what we have. And now you'll notice it switched the bold to table array. Table array is, okay, well, where do you want me to get the new data from? So what do I want the RSVP data from? I want it from the other sheet. So I'm going to click over to the other sheet. And then I'm going to select the whole sheet. So you'll notice I can just select all of this information here. And then I can put another comma. Column index number. So what this is saying is, okay, I've got the spreadsheet here. Where do you want me to pull the data from? And in this case, we want the RSVPs. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is column 4. So that's what we're going to put in here. So I'm going to say 4. And then for range lookup, what it's asking is, okay, if I can't find an exact value, do you want me to kind of guess? I highly recommend you don't do that. I highly recommend you go with exact match, because then if it's not a match, it won't falsely show a match. So I always recommend people do false here. There are some cases for true. Approximate matches can work. I think for people with names and nicknames, like it might help with a Michael or a Mike, stuff like that. But I usually recommend people do false and then see what you get. And then if you have a lot of errors, try true and see if it helps. But I'm going to put in false, and then I'm going to hit enter. So in this case, it's giving me a little bit of an error, and this can happen sometimes. It's actually adding an @ in here. I don't know why it's doing that. I've never seen it do that before, but I'm going to keep that @ in there because it's asking me to do that. And you'll notice now we have RSVP yes, which is great. We've got that there. If we go back and look at our fundraiser RSVPs, it's always a good idea to spot check a few of these. So for instance, let's just make sure, yes, that is a yes. In this case, it's a 50-50 chance, but still important to check that. And then you can use that same option. If you go here, you can click and drag to send it down, or you can double click and you'll notice it will fill the whole thing in. So I could do this for another, one too. So if I wanted to, I could copy and paste this, and I can put in column 5. I don't remember what column 5 was, but we could pull that in. It's probably confused. Oh, because it's looking at column B. So we have to change that to A. And you'll notice it's trying to get it, but I think it's getting a little confused. So this is where we'd have to. Yep, and it was pulling an address. So what I did there, it just moved it over a column. So it wasn't looking at column A for those 2 steps here. So the range lookup and the lookup value, the table array, they all had to be pulling in column A to look for stuff. So that's why it wasn't showing up. But anyway, you can always go back in and kind of tweak that. And then you'll see as I expand down, then it's got all the addresses. So you can pull in data like this in a really nice way. And anytime you see an error message in here, it means it wasn't able to find a match. Now, in this case, we're using the exact same data for those email addresses, so there are no mismatches. But there might be cases where you see an error because it couldn't find anything. And in those cases, you know that there's no information there about that particular person. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. So that's the VLOOKUP. Again, just a reminder of what all of those fields are. First of all, we have our equals VLOOKUP to tell it what to do. Lookup value is going to be the thing they have in common. And in this case, that's column A. I'm going to put their @ right beforehand like they had before, because it seems that seems to be working here. The table array is where do we want me to pull the information from, which in this case is our large spreadsheet here. I add a comma. Our column index number is what are we pulling here? In this case, I'm going to pull in favorite color. So that's C123. And false because I want it to be an exact match. And when I press enter, there it is, and I can extend it down. So try this amongst yourselves, take some time to practice it, and then come back when you're ready to talk about our final topic for the day. Okay. So now we're going to talk about pivot tables. I love to talk about pivot tables because I think that sometimes people are worried that pivot tables are going to be intimidating. It's really just a high-powered fancy filter. So for instance, I might decide that as I'm looking at all this information, I want to track certain information by other information that I have. So there's tons of things I could do here. Like I can sort out and I can filter. I can filter out everyone who said no on the RSVP and stuff like that. But you can use a pivot table to say, I want to know how much each state is donating. How much donation money are we getting per state? So to do all of this, you're going to highlight the entire table just like this. And then you're going to go insert, and there's going to be a pivot chart. Or a pivot table, sorry. There are pivot charts, which is another thing up here. You don't need to worry about that right now, but it is something you can use in a very similar way. But we're going to go to the pivot table here, which is over on the side, the first thing that you're seeing. And right now we're going to do from this range or table, and we're going to pull in this whole one. I'm going to put it into a new worksheet. So you'll notice it actually added another sheet down here. And this is our pivot. So right now it's blank because it doesn't know what we want to do yet. So we're going to try some things out. The cool part about pivot tables is that they've gotten a lot smarter. I feel like the reason why people were so intimidated by them for such a long time is because I think you used to have to do a lot more manual work. But what you can do here, so maybe we want to track the donations by state. So maybe I grab donations, and you'll notice it's actually summing up all the donations, which is kind of cool. But I'm going to grab home state too. And it kind of figured out already. All right, for each row, I want one of the states, and it's showing me the sum by state, which is really cool. We can see the full total down below, but we've got all the different states here. And this is completely random because I kind of played around with this. But you could then, after you've done this pivot table, maybe you're looking at this and maybe you want to flag which states are the highest and which are the lowest. You could go in and use that conditional formatting that we talked about. So like if I want to grab all of these here and I want to do the conditional formatting, I go back to home, conditional formatting. Maybe I want a color scale here and I want it to be, you know, the ones that are the most or the least, I can pull in that way. So if I click that right here, the ones that are really dark, those are the highest ones. I could also sort and filter by that just the same way. But right now it's sorting by the state in alphabetical order. And you can see that Texas apparently is really donating, followed by like California and Florida here. Interesting. This was all completely randomized. So I put a bunch of random numbers in to put this in. So this is all obviously, there's no actual correlation here. But you can do other things too. So you can play around to see what's notable here. So maybe I wanted to know too how this splits out by RSVP. And so in this case, it's showing that based on RSVP here, for each state, you can see how much was donated. So for in this case, it says Alabama, the no's donated this much, the yeses donated this much. If I take out home state for a second, you can see that we can easily compare no's and yeses. And this is just by checking this off. You'll notice I'm not actually doing anything here. There's no magic, I promise. Like I can almost do it with no hands, but I do have to click. And so you can really kind of play around here to see what you're getting based on that. So other things you can try. So for instance, maybe I want to see, you know, if there's any correlation between t-shirt size and donation, which like, again, very, very random. So you can see for some reason our size small seems to be slacking. They have far fewer donations than everyone else, which again, completely random numbers. But you could split things up, slice and dice things, however makes the most sense. If you want to actually move things around, so let's say I go back to my donation by state here. If I wanted to have another column in here, I can click and drag it from this. So maybe I want to be able to filter by favorite color for all of this stuff. I can drag this into filter, and what it's going to do is up at the top, it will make a little kind of button area, and I can say, okay, I want to know all of this information, but I want to know it based on everyone whose favorite color is blue. And it will filter accordingly. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do to make all of this happen. Or maybe kind of more relevant, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to grab the RSVP and pull that into filter. And maybe then I want to see, okay, I want to see who RSVP'd no and what the donations look like. So all of this is stuff you can play with, and I highly encourage you to really try it out with the sample data because you can get a sense for what's out there. This can be a super powerful thing to show someone if you really want to understand the data that you've got here. And really, I think the more you practice it, the more comfortable you'll feel. And again, this can be really impressive. I use this all the time for survey results. I do a lot of training in my desk job. And, we'll often send out feedback surveys or, needs assessment surveys or things like that. And often it helps for me to be able to sort the data by location, for instance. So like we'll have different regions. And so I can pull in information. If we have all the regions, I can use a VLOOKUP to map the regions to specific people. And then based on that, I can actually pull in, I can say, okay, this works for our European offices, but it doesn't work for our Asian offices. I can kind of see all of that information based on those locations, and it's often more meaningful than just looking at it all in aggregate. All right. So with that, that's actually the last topic we're going to talk about today. Just so you know, and I want to stress this again, this is all something that you can Google after the fact if you forget. You don't have to memorize what I'm telling you here. It all is out there. There's more even to play with out here. But I hope that getting some of these skills under your belt will make you feel more confident about the fact that you can absolutely learn how to do this. And it's something that hopefully can help you with whatever you're doing in an office environment. So thank you so much for your attention today and your time today. Keep practicing, and hopefully you're going to have some really awesome spreadsheets to show for all of this work. Rachel, I think we can stop recording now. I'm not sure if I can.